Welcome to the Artists Index. I'm Scott Bishop, your host for this episode. I'm a New Bedford-based singer, songwriter, and sound sculptor making music under the name Scapegoat. I also present the live concert series, Unexpected Music, which features South Coast musicians performing in non-traditional performing spaces around New Bedford. The In Focus podcasts are generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agency supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency.
I'd like to invite our guest to introduce himself and talk a little bit about himself and what he does.
My name is Eric Baylies. I am a writer and musician, born in New Bedford, Mass, and continue to be based out of this fine city.
And how long have you lived here?
My entire life, 56 years.
Woo!
Yeah.
What's the appeal of living in New Bedford and staying here your whole life?
Well, there's good and bad. Traditionally, and until recently, it's always been very cheap. That's changing, I guess, a little, but not as much as the bigger metropolitan areas. But, it's cheap. It's a short or reasonable drive to Providence, Amherst, New York, Boston, the Cape, Newport. And, I have all my family and friends are here. Hawaii and warmer climates are starting to be a little more appealing right now, I have to say. So we'll see. But also, I work in New Bedford High School for a long time. So when I retire in 100 years, I'd like to be able to get my tiny, tiny, tiny Social Security and my tiny New Bedford High School pension. And then we'll see from there. I'm thinking about moving to Hawaii in a few years, but, not not a cheap place to live either. So
what are you working on while you're here? Because you've been you've worked as a creative artist with writing and music for a long time. So what's on your plate right now?
In the last 4 months, Baylies Band, which has been my main band for 29 years, we've released 2 albums through House of Wax Records, 2 vinyl records in the last 4 months. Photosynthesis and Madonna Lives in My Basement. And I've put out 3 books in the last 6 months. That Takes an Acid Trip, which is a surrealist psychedelic novel. Talking Like a Man with a Paper Asshole, which is an anthology of poetry and lyrics of the since 1984. And Cold as a Witch's Cunt, which is another surrealist psychedelic novel, but this one is written in the second person, which is challenging to write and keep at and not forget. Instead of, I did this or they did this, the book is all you. You are doing this, you are doing that. And that's maybe a little hard to follow for the reader and difficult to write. But I took that as a challenge because I remember taking classes at UMass 35 years ago or something. And these are the 3 main kind of forms of writing, From what I remember, I could Google, but, there were 2 or 3 examples they talked about. And I was like, I've never heard of these books. And I tried reading one. I was like, I can't even read this. This is insane,
It's funny.
So I took that for many years. I was in the background I want to tackle that. I don't know if I'll do it well, but I'm going to tackle it.
How do you think you did with it?
I think, based on the filter of what I like and what I've read in my life, I was a history major, but I also was into creative writing and Kurt Vonnegut or Ray Bradbury or whatever, comics when I was a kid, filtered through what I like. I think it's pretty good. What other people might think, I don't know. But
it's funny. You mentioned comics, and the first thing I think of when I think of the second person is the old EC horror comics, where that second person was the primary way of communicating the story. They always had this. You walk into the kitchen and you see whatever,
Oh, EC, the horror
stuff.
Okay,
yeah.
That turned into Atlas and then Marvel, eventually, right?
No, it didn't.
Or was it Mad Magazine?
Mad, exactly.
Okay.
Because the Comics Code drove the horror stuff out of business. Okay. So they were pretty much exclusively Mad Magazine after that, which is also wild to think about. The same folks who gave us all this crazy horror stuff and sci-fi, and then what they're really known for historically now is Mad Magazine.
It's weird to me, too, that that was probably a primary influence on my life, too, was Mad Magazine. My brothers are 4 and 10 years older. So, I was born in 67. I got to read a lot of Mad Magazines from 63 to 1982. I got real bored with it. But it's insane to me that ceased publication 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, I know.
And it seemed fun, too, because it was ripe to, I feel, to keep going because with Trump as president, there's a lot. There's a lot to make fun of, because when I was a kid, it was like Nixon or whatever, So
I mean, there was no political figure they couldn't lampoon, but Trump and extreme right wing. I mean, those are all right to make fun of and do stories about.
Yeah, and even when Clinton was president,
sure,
I wasn't really reading it then, but I'm sure there's plenty you could lampoon,
Yeah.
But
so, how do you balance all the different projects? Like 3 books, 2 records. I mean, you're playing out too, right?
Still playing out. With my job, I only work like 2.5 hours a week. And it's not physically demanding. So sometimes I'll play a show till like 2, 3 in the morning and go to work the next day. And people are even like 30, like, oh my God, how can you do that? Whatever. Well, I'll take a nap in the afternoon and go play the show and go to work, when I was like 20, I would just be up all night, drink, play a show, go to work, construction, a hard job.
Yeah.
And I don't hardly drink now, so it makes it a little easier to sometimes go to work on 4 hours of sleep. But the books, in 6 months, I put out 3 books and 2 vinyl records through House of Buds. And one of the books was easier because it was an anthology of poetry and lyrics. So most of that had already been written. There was only a few newer pieces. So that was just a matter of going through old CDs or records or just notebooks and finding what I wanted and going through it, Whereas the other books were a bit more like work,
Because you're generating it. It's not like it's not material that's already there. Now I've got to create this thing.
Right.
But even so, like 2 novels which you created from scratch in 6. Well, let me ask this, because you put them out in the last 6 months. How long did each of them take to write?
Well, going back to my first one that I put out 12 years ago, the first book I wrote I was a little wary because the first one, a friend of mine died from when I grew up in the neighborhood I grew up in. So in about a week, I wrote my first book in 2002. But it wasn't quite ready. It took me 11 years to finally put that out. I revamped it, edited it at least 12, 13 times, and also I was just like, at the time too, I was like, I have this book. I already have a really expensive hobby. And back then I would probably go every week or every other week to the post office. In 2001, 2002, 2003, I was probably still spending about $2,000 to $3,000 a year at the post office while making like $10,000 a year. And most of that stuff is being sent to, like, I wasn't selling records or CDs or books like I sell some now. This was all to labels and zines and some managers or whatever. So that was all money going out, never coming in. So I was like, all right, I've got this. It's almost done. It wasn't almost done, but it's almost done. What the heck do I do with it? Because I knew a few people that had written or whatever, but I didn't know any literary agents or whatever. So finally, I just put it out with my friends at 75 Less Records. So, but I wasn't sure what I would do. It took many years. So with this, things have changed a bit in the 22 years, 21 years. So now it's just a lot easier and cheaper and common to self-publish. So I wasn't too worried about it. I was like, I'm just going to put these out myself. And then maybe later, if someone wants to put it out again, they can. If not, it's not the end of the world. We'll sell them at our shows and this and that. But so also the help that one of the books is only like 120 pages. So it's more like a novella, I guess. And the other one is slightly under 200 pages. So it wasn't like Stephen King, the guy. Somehow, I haven't really paid attention to him much in the last 20 years. When I was young, I read a lot of his books. But somehow, even with all his wealth and his advancing age, probably writes 3,000 to 4,000, 5,000 pages a year that gets published. I think maybe people just don't have the guts to go, Stephen, you haven't used an editor since 1975. Maybe we can cut out a few of these things, So.
Yeah, who's going to say no to Stephen King?
At this point, I don't know. His wife. But she writes too, so she's busy. So it's not as like painstaking as that, you know.
What drove you to and still drives you to do all this work? Like, it just seems like you're creatively going nonstop.
A lot of people have said, I don't know who first said it, probably goes back to the Greeks or Romans, but if you do something you love, it's not work. I think most of the people that say that get paid for what they do. So there's a little difference there. But, sometimes it's work to just write something can be some work, but to like edit it 5, 6, 7 times so that you're proud of it and you think it might not even be good, but you think it's good and you're ready for people to see it. That does take some work, and sometimes, I'm not in the mood for this. I want to go out. I want to do this or that, But I think it's worth it, And time's running out. I'm not a kid. It's like I'm kind of vaguely aware of like a legacy, even if there's only like 6 bands or whatever spread out. Like I want to leave a body of work that I'm proud of. I've always had a strong work ethic, I guess. But I really enjoy it. And music, it's a whole different thing, of course, because I play some solo shows, but usually it's collaborating with people and different schedules and personalities. But I enjoy that too, even though bands, can drive you insane.
Anyone listening who's been in a band knows, like, bands are funky, fragile things.
Yeah.
And it's that interesting mix of personalities that make bands what they are and also make them a real challenge to be in.
I've been in a bunch of bands that we can jump around them, but my main band since 1994 has been Baylies Band. There's been over 60 members of the band in that time. And that doesn't count. We've done like some improv shows when the band maybe wasn't ready to play. So it's just, we're going to make that an improv show at AS220. And so we did a couple of things at AS220 specifically, where we had 20 to 30 people on stage improvising. So I don't count those people. And sometimes when we go on tour, it's like, oh, this guy plays sax in Atlanta, or this guy does that in Miami. Let's see if he or she can play on a couple of songs, sax or whatever instrument. I'm not counting them. If I counted them, it might be like 300 people in the last 29 years,
What prompted you to start Baylies Band and have this big collective over time?
Well, it's mostly like it's a set band. There's 6 people in it, but it's evolved. I started playing out in bands, in 1984. So in 1984, I started playing with a band called Brain Farm with a couple of childhood friends. And it predated the term noise rock, but it kind of was. We did improv. We didn't have any songs, and we played out for about 4 or 5 years, much to the horror of a lot of concert goers. The first show I played, I was very happy. I had some older friends that were friends with my brothers and stuff and grew up in the neighborhood. So I was lucky. I had some friends that were friends with the 2 like kind of well-known bands in the Bedford area at the time, the Glue-Ons, who turned into Blue Hollow, and Holy Cow. And the 2 singers of those bands were brothers. And so I was really into these bands. And UMass Dartmouth had a radio station up until like 2 years ago, but they went online only about 6 years ago, but they had a great radio station for many years. And they would play these guys all the time, like they were like the local stars, So I was excited. The first band I ever played with was Blue Hollow. It was the record release party, I guess. And it was very exciting to play. And I was like, oh, this, it's kind of like Midge Yours band, Ultravox. Yep. And like, they started out kind of like U2, but then it was more like Echo and the Bunnymen and, new wave with some synths. And I was like, oh, people have very open minds to see these guys. This is going to be great, And then we did like a half-hour improv set, like Velvet Underground, but like Sonic Youth-y kind of. Stunned silence. There was like 300 people there. So I was like, well, there'll be like at least 30 people that like us, 10%, Stunned silence, like one guy clapped. And he said to me after, I've never seen anything like that, which I thought about after a few weeks later. I was like, that still doesn't mean he liked it. It's just he'd never seen anything like it. And now, to me, I go to like Providence and Amherst all the time, and I've traveled, and I see stuff like that all the time. But in like a blue collar city in 1984, that just did not go over well at all, you know? And then, so I did that for a few years. And then for about 4 years, I was in a band called Blind Rhino, which started out as a kind of new wave band with punk influences. And we traveled to like Chicago, DC, not all over, but half the country maybe. So I was starting to get out there a little more, not just Providence, you know? And then the band, so everybody hated heavy metal. And I was the only guy that like in the closet I liked Judas Priest and Black Sabbath and stuff. I didn't want to play that. You know, it was very hard to play, probably, especially at the time for me. But I liked it, but I didn't want to play like a heavy metal band. And so then all of a sudden, like, the band was going to go on tour with Nuclear Assault, who I don't like at all. I don't know if you know them, but a guy from like Anthrax and stuff.
Okay.
I didn't like the band. It wasn't a style I wanted to do. And all of a sudden the band they kind of changed into like almost a heavy metal band to go on tour with these guys and do a record with that guy producing it. I was like, this isn't what I want to do. I was like, Sonic Youth was my favorite band, you know, because New Wave was kind of had died out already. But I was like, well, I like that. I like Sonic Youth. I like the Cars. I like Suicide. I don't want to be in a metal band. So I quit that. And I went to UMass full time for a couple of years and started Baylies Band. Was kind of playing here and there in Philly or something, but not all over. And then I tried to have jobs where like have the summer off or whatever, have some time off. So then we started traveling more. We've played 48 states, and I've played with different bands. I've played in like half of Europe, and I was in another band, Bad Motherfucker, for about 13 years too, and we did a 3-week tour of Japan. So I'm able to do a lot of these things. Not luxurious, you know, sleeping on people's couches. Sometimes they're floors, but, you know, been able to do that, which has been very fortunate and fun. But it's weird too. It's like someone would be in the band for maybe a couple of years, like, yeah, I want to go to Paris or something. For some reason, all the band guys want to go to Amsterdam. I don't know why. So, but we've been lucky to play there a bunch. And after a couple of years, a lot of guys are like, oh, my wife says it's time to quit. We're having a baby or whatever. Like, okay, fine. You know, what we've done the last few years, we did a lot of, Sonic Youth's always been my favorite band, Velvet Underground, and some old Pink Floyd stuff. But then we'd have some stuff, depending on the lineup, like King Crimson, that was a little more difficult, you know, or Proggy or something. Yeah. And the last few years, we have a lot of songs with one part, some with like one note, and some songs with only like 2 or 3 parts. And the reason for that is the band, I was just going insane after a while. I was like, oh my God, like we get rolling, we do a tour, and it's like we have old songs and we start working on new songs, and then someone leaves the band and we have to like start all over. And it's like, well, instead of teaching this person 20 songs, we'll just do whatever we're going to play live now, maybe, you know, and everything kind of gets lost. So I was just, if we make the songs easier, we can have people, if they're good, practice 3 times and then they can get in a van with us for a couple of weeks, you know? So it's kind of evolved.
So really simplifying the songs became a necessity because it's the only way you can sustain a band that has changeover. Bring new people in. It's like, well, you know, they're not going to learn songs with 5 parts and 20 chords, but they'll learn one with 3 parts and like 3 chords and pick it up quickly. And,
you know, we do have some songs that this could sound boring, you know, but we do have some songs where it's like, it's one note. It's, you know, so easy. I don't think it gets boring because, you know, there are ways to do that, you know.
Well, I think of like, you know, Husker Du on Zen Arcade doing Reoccurring Dreams. And there's a stretch where it's just the one note feeding back. And there's just enough going on with it, with the band behind it. That's like, I could listen to this for an hour because there's just little changes happening in it that are just really interesting.
The bass player's band, Ultra Bomb, might be coming around here soon. They're doing a tour.
I hope so. God,
because they were doing a tour last year, and then the bass player got cancer, and he's recovered now, I guess.
Yep.
Well, Grant Hart was the drummer.
Greg Norton is.
Oh, Norton. Okay, yeah. That might be cool. I've seen Grant Hart Nova Mob, and I saw Bob Mould with Soul Asylum when they were like an underground band.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of. They were still on like Twin
he
Tone.
produced their first record.
They were still on Twin Tone. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
And I saw them at Brown University, and they were pretty great. I'm not really sure. It might have been New Day Rising tour.
Yeah.
But I'm not 100% sure. And then I saw him solo at UMass maybe 10, 15 years later. Didn't like that as much. I like it with a band, but yeah, they're pretty great.
So, in terms of your travels, what do you bring back from all those excursions? What do you bring back here to New Bedford in terms of experience?
Cuts, bruises, staggering debt.
How about the good stuff? Oh,
that is the good stuff. That's the good stuff. We don't talk about the bad stuff. Culturally, you meet different people. Hopefully, try different foods. I know that we did 3 weeks in Japan, which is the longest I've been outside the country. Well, that's not true, but for music outside the country. And the other guys, it was a trio, and the other guys did like sushi and seafood. You'd think guys would be better for like seafood, but you'd be wrong. So I like fish and chips or whatever, And it's courtesy and respect is very important in Japan, Asian cultures in general, I guess. And after a couple of days, I was just like, no. The other guys, they tried everything, people would stay with people and they're like, their mothers or grandmothers would take out like an octopus and his eyes was like staring at you like, no, I'm not going to have that. So for 3 weeks, they have wonderful steakhouses there, but they're kind of expensive. So I try to go like once a week or every 5 days. But I kind of lived on Hershey bars there for 3 weeks and white rice. I didn't like a lot of the food. I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but a lot of it I didn't like. And it's weird because pizza is a delicacy there. Pizza's like super expensive. It's like $40 American dollars, like 4,000 yen for like a pizza. And it wasn't fancy like brick oven. I mean, it was just like pizza,
like Domino's or something.
And I talked to some of my American friends that lived there. I was like, why don't you guys just open a pizzeria? Like, there's none around. Yet the Japanese people that we know seem to love it. And, and of course, there is McDonald's there, but I didn't want to eat McDonald's more than like once a week either, So the other guys came back, they gained weight. I lost like 10 pounds, It was amazing, though, because we had toured with this band from Japan called the Wimmer twice in the Northeast. A guy who I don't even really know reached out to me about getting him a show or two. I said, okay. And he was very persistent. I was like, man, this guy. And I ended up booking almost the whole tour twice, 2 years in a row. And they're like, oh, yeah, come to Japan. And I was like, I would love to. But I wasn't holding my breath because I've hosted a lot of people stayed at my house and stuff like that over the years. And like some reciprocate, but the ones that are far away tend to not, And we were planning on doing a couple of shows in England. We had a couple of shows booked, but I was having a lot of trouble filling in the blanks. All of a sudden, we got a message. You guys want to tour with us for 3 weeks? In like 6 weeks, you won't have to bring drums or amps. And for like me, I didn't even need a bass because he has a Fender bass. I like the same color that I have. And we'll drive you around most of the time and places to stay. I was like, yeah. And then I asked my band at the time, Bad Motherfucker at the time, the three of us, I was the only one with a passport because I'd already traveled. You guys need to get your passports like right now. It's expensive to do it fast,
Yeah, I know.
They did it, and it was great. We did 3 weeks, and it was funny. Like an old Baylies Band drummer was also in a band called Gaskill. I don't know if you know Kevin Grant. He sings in Wire.
Yeah, I do. I've met him.
He sang in a lot of bands the last 25 years. So his old drummer also played in Baylies Band for like 2 years, and so he's been living in Japan for like 20 years, I guess, 22 years. And so at the time he'd been there like 17 years, and no one had visited him yet. His mother, his sister, because it's very expensive, it's far away. And so I was the first friend to go visit him. I wasn't going there specifically to see him, but he was just so happy to see anybody, like an American and from New Bedford, So that was cool. We had like some interpreters, but for most of the time, we were basically with our friends, our Japanese friends. And we don't speak Japanese, and they don't speak English. And we were almost ready to go home. We played like 20 shows in 22 days. We were almost ready to go home, a couple more shows. And we were trying to communicate, like, oh, pretty lady, like water, like bathroom, like whatever we would point to body parts, And then one day my friend was like, whoa, 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 whoa. You wait. I'm like, what? And he grabs his phone. He points to his phone. He goes, you talk, and he hits it. The whole time we were there, he had this was fairly new technology 6 years ago, but he had the translator app on his phone and didn't use it until we almost went home. Like, oh my God.
This could have saved so much trouble 2.5 months ago.
Because sometimes there were people that spoke English, but not all the time, And it was weird sometimes too. We'd go out to eat, or we'd get our sleeping arrangements. We'd take turns sleeping at one of their parents' houses or whatever. And it was like, all right, how do I say chic? How do I say, oh my God, how come no one in Japan has air conditioning? And we went in August. It was like so muggy, and hardly anyone had air conditioning, which is a shock to Americans. Even like Europe, like they hardly have air conditioning, or they barely have it on. So you're not profusely sweating, but you're not necessarily comfortable to sleep either.
Right. Wild adventures.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the value of like having an underground music scene in cities. I mean, what do you see as the values as a guy who does underground art? You're friends with Devin Burns, who, does the 4752 festival, Picnic Lunch, is really more of an underground thing. What's the value of that kind of scene in the broader context of an arts and culture scene in a place like New Bedford?
New Bedford has always been a metal town, and now you sit with the younger people, you'll see it's more hip hop, and I don't see that changing. It's tough because a lot of the people, it's frustrating. So a lot of the people that are here leave, and then that are from here to seek opportunities, whether it's the actual job or music. And, Baylies Band we started rehearsing for the first year or two at my friend Josh Newton's house, because we didn't have a place to play, And he was friends with he played in a band with some of my good friends growing up called Glazed Baby. And he eventually just left, like, because it's not a small town, but it seems like it culturally sometimes, certainly musically. And so he took off, and, he's been in bands for like the last 30 years. He was in a band from Autumn to Ashes and toured with Slipknot for like 4 months, who I don't like, but that's certainly like a big deal. They played it because I saw him somewhere and we were catching up, and I was excited because like I played with Psychic TV and MF Doom at like a festival in Tilburg, which is near Amsterdam, and it was like a couple thousand people, which is very exciting to me, but then we played like a lot of like arts council, like AS220 type places, and house parties, or like dingy clubs or whatever. So we had one great show, like a couple of good ones, and then like very small shows. And I was so excited. I was like, wow, it's so like my third European tour, I was like, oh, I'm so excited. And I'm like, what are you up to? He's like, oh, yeah, I just came back from like a 4-month tour of Europe and Australia and South America, opening for Slipknot, playing to like 30 to 50,000 people a night, and like they put us up in hotels, and because I was excited when we would get fed. We got fed a few times like Indian food in Europe. I was like, oh, this is so nice, Whereas in America, you're lucky to get pizza, cold pizza, with like a bite taken out. And I was like, I don't really have interest in playing with a big commercial band or whatever, but like for a minute, I was like, wow.
Those are some nice amenities.
Wow. And they all get, like, not only hotels, but like they get their own room. I'm just happy to be in a room on a couch, and like the other guys are like crashing on the bed 2 or 3 at a time. Like, wow, your own room. That's insane, So New Bedford. And then, with UMass, I haven't been as much lately. I always used to go and put up flyers or whatever and like see what else is kind of playing. Up until probably before COVID. I haven't been there since before COVID. But I would always go to UMass, put up flyers and stuff. And it always seemed to be like one, for like 35 years, it always seemed to be like one band and like younger people that are into like Sonic Youth or Pavement or something. And then they would graduate, and some might be from like St. Louis or somewhere, they'd go back home. But for like a year or two, they'd be like, oh, this is a really like interesting band, And then like they'd be gone. So it'd make it difficult for us to play with people here. We'd have to always have people from Amherst and Providence that musically would fit in with us. If it's like a club, we want like No Problemo or something. We want the owner to make money too. We want to be able to keep coming back. We want the bartenders to be happy. So we try to mix in a New Bedford band with us all the time too. And sometimes it'd be very difficult because we can't just play with Picnic Lunch 40 shows in a row and No Problemo,
And you can't just bring in bands that are like, here's this mellow group that they got their Mellotron or whatever it is. You got to have somebody who's simpatico with what you do. If it's not the same, it's at least kind of aligned.
And it can be very difficult at times in New Bedford, So,
I mean, you look at the 4752 Festival, which I love, but it's a lot of bands that have to come from, like you said, Providence, Connecticut, Amherst, because Devin can't fill up a bill like that with just people from here. Like, I got to play it the second time around, and I sound conventional compared to everyone else. It's like, I appreciate being on there, but I'm a bad fit for that because I'm kind of the straight guy.
It's weird too because also like I went to UMass Dartmouth, and then after I was a student, I was a DJ there for about 4 years or something. But some of my good friends were DJs there, like all the way through from the 80s till it stopped. And it's weird because when I was younger, they seemed to have like WSMU nights, so it was like WMD for a while. And they weren't like kind of involved in the community for a long time. And it's also weird that like UMass Dartmouth, really the last like 15 years, they hardly have bands at all there. Like I remember I was DJing there, and it was like UMass Amherst had Metallica one night. Not that they're like avant-garde or anything, but like that's kind of a big band, UMass Amherst had Metallica, and on the same night, UMass Dartmouth had the Village People, who I've seen are not pretty good actually. They're kind of fun, but it was just like, wow, Metallica, love them or not, but that's something like college students at the time, a lot of them liked, and was like one of the biggest bands in the world. And Village People were just like this throwaway oldies act, that didn't even have a band. They just had a CD on, boom, and like sang and dance, So that was like kind of the difference of like Amherst to like UMass, But they used to have, the Pretenders played there, the Clash played there, and they don't even have concerts at this. I can see BCC, it's smaller,
Yeah.
But it's unbelievable that UMass Dartmouth doesn't even have concerts now.
That is wild, especially when you look back at the history of it.
And when they've had some stuff that like I don't like, but it's like, all right, well, if the kids like it, cool, well, let them make some money. Because I don't like Sublime, but like Sublime played there, I guess, before the guy died. And Ziggy Marley played there. Not the worst, not my favorite, but not the worst. But they just don't have anything there,
I mean, is it just they don't have a budget for it? It's not a priority?
Well, they should have a budget. It's not a priority. And like, people come and go. So like in the past, they might have like, we've played there sometimes. Like they have a beautiful outdoor. It's the, I guess, Vietnam Veterans Memorial Amphitheater or whatever. So it's almost like Pink Floyd live in Pompeii, where it's like that natural amphitheater.
Yeah.
Not as fancy, but it's kind of nice. And it just would be so easy to get a couple of extension cords and just play a free show. Just like, all right, let us know. So we have like one security guard, you know what I mean? You're not going to get paid even, but just so you can have a fun show there. And they haven't had stuff like that there for years. And they have so many little stages. They have a music program there. So they have like a bunch of little stages too, besides the auditorium and the gym. There are many places to hold shows there. And they just haven't really for years. And you think with the money they saved, because when I matriculated there, I was a commuter student because I lived in New Bedford. So I took a bus there or got a ride. And I think in 1993, 94 as a full-time student, I think I spent, and I had some grants, scholarships, but I think I spent less than $500 a semester to go there for a few years. And most of what I spent was on books, used books if I could get them. And, it's about $27,000 to go there now, I think, a year.
Yeah.
As a commuter student, I don't know what it is to live there. They always get grants and stuff. They've cut out like some majors. They sold the frequency to the radio station. So I'm not saying they have like money out their ears with endowments like Brown or Harvard, but there's some money there, and it's nuts. Like the radio station, this doesn't make money. We're going to cross out line item veto this radio station. It's like, well, not everything is meant to make money, It's part of the appeal to get students to want to go to that school, because a lot of mid-sized to smallish universities don't have a radio station,
Or stages to play on.
Yeah.
It's like their priority is spitting kids out to have a career. And like the cultural life is, if it's even secondary, if it's even present at all.
Especially after Swain School of Design closed, it was known as a pretty good art school. It's not RISD, but pretty good art school for people whose parents aren't super rich. But, every few years they try to like cut out a lot of the arts and music programs at UMass Dartmouth. It's like, well, it can't just be 8,000 business majors,
Right.
But maybe it can. Maybe it will be in 5 years. But it's just a shame. They're cutting out stuff though. We can't afford this, but they play the shell game, because when I was a student there, UMass Dartmouth did not have a football team. They had a hockey team, they had a tennis team, and a golf team, but footballs are expensive, They have a football team now. Where did that money come from?
Mm-hmm.
Did it fall out of the sky? I don't know the answer,
But it's part of the overall devaluing of arts and creativity. Like, we live in a culture that doesn't want to pay artists.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that, a university like that would also like, do we need music? Do we need that kind of enrichment? But we'll have a football team.
And, nothing against football, but in a bigger university, but like they managed to get by without one for many years when it was SMU, Southeastern Massachusetts University, which is, I'm so old that I took summer classes and evening classes there before I became a full-time student. It was still SMU when I started going there, which is kind of crazy because it's been UMass for, 35 years, I think, 36 years, And I remember people saying back then, like, this is going to devalue the university. They're going to lose their autonomy. And it's better off as an independent school. And people are like, well, it's part of the UMass system. So they don't offer Chinese and Arabic there and all kinds of stuff. So you could go and then just take a short drive every day to Amherst and take these classes short, And I was like, huh? I was pretty young. So I was like, what do I know? I don't know. But I feel like, I hate to say worse for anybody that's going in now, but it's worse. They had their autonomy, and they had, I know money's always an issue, but they had probably most of their professors were tenured and could, within reason, could do what they want, And now, UMass Dartmouth and BCC, like, you could be there 20 years and not be a full-time tenured professor. They have all these part-time professors, no benefits or whatever. And I just think SMU was a lot better. It's like lost in bureaucracy too, I just feel like it was so much better before, maybe not perfect, but, unless you can afford to go to Yale, SMU, I thought was a pretty good deal, And of course, inflation is going to go up, but instead of going up double or treble the tuition, it's gone up like 50 times
right
in 30 years. And that's kind of insane. And then, if you go to like an Ivy League school, unless you're an artist or a musician, that degree has some weight. That little piece of paper actually has some weight, and you get like a good job or something, but, not necessarily at UMass, So culturally, it's tough here. It's small city, people are trying to escape. I feel like there's a lot more artists than musicians.
I think the thing is there are a lot of musicians, but there isn't a cohesive scene because there's not like a gathering place, because we have to kind of invent our venues. Yeah. Like, we had you over at Diana Arvanites' studio at Hatch Street with at Free Jazz Now. Like I have people over at Interwoven for shows. I play Arcade's great for opening that up, but there's no rock clubs. So you don't have that kind of congregating scene where, you might have hip hop one night, you might have noise rock another, but a lot of the same people are going to show up and check out whatever's going on, which is what I remember from, living in Boston, that you had that in multiple places.
It's tough. My friend Manny died about 6-7 years ago. He's probably about 15 years older than me, but he had clubs off and on in New Bedford for about 30, and Westport for about 30, over 30 years. He would open up a club. He had like a club in the 70s, and he brought in Mission of Burma and Human Sexual Response and stuff like that. And SMU would actually, WSMU, WMD would play these bands. So it's weird to think now, but they would have like 100 people come to see him, which for the kind of music they have, and considering here, it's like,
that's pretty good.
That is pretty good. But also the drinking age was 18 for a while. And so people went out a lot more, I guess. And thinking about like rock and roll, or whatever that means, whether you consider it, I think it was like the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, so about 64, and the Stones, Kinks, Animals around 65. But even if you count it from like 57, 58, it was still sort of a new thing, even for like the kids' parents that were going out, And now maybe rock and roll's been out so long, it's like, you're in a band,
Yeah.
But so he had clubs every few years. He would have a club and it would go out of business. And he was a chef. So he would like work and save most of his money except for like some cocaine binges. And he would save all his money except for that. At least he didn't waste it, So he would save all his money and then he would open another place in New Bedford or Fairhaven, and it just didn't work. Especially by like 1990, he opened a place called the Curfew on Acushnet Avenue, and he brought in amazing bands. And because it was pre-internet, I don't know how he even got some of these bands from like Kansas City or like, he had Tad, he had like these, I think Screaming Trees, like,
oh wow.
But before they were on the radio, so like 10 people would come, but he had to pay him like $300, and he had rent. And what's nuts too is like he had some bars. The Curfew was a juice bar.
Oh my God, that's too funny.
So it was usually $5 to get in for some bigger bands. So he had a band, not X, a band from Holland that they did like some split stuff with Sonic Youth. They've been around for like 40 years. And they might be like $10, but you go in there, there'd be like 6 people there. And he's paying these guys $300-400. It's like, oh man. Because without an alcohol license, even with an alcohol license, it's a tough business. But with no alcohol, all he was getting was the door. And he had to split with the bands. He didn't serve food.
And he's guaranteed $300 or $400
to some of the big bands, not the local bands, So he was just ahead of his time or behind his time. I don't know, but he had amazing bands there, but people weren't ready for it. The closest we've had kind of, I think, is, for many years, it's nuts. When I first was playing, there weren't really steady clubs to play in New Bedford. And that's why we played Providence more often when I was younger. And that became the beachhead because there was no way to play in New Bedford. You'd have to like rent a VFW or something like that. And some of the places, like, you could tell if a VFW was doing bad, they'd start having bands. Because if they were doing well, they'd be like, oh, we don't want bands anymore. Because they might have some stuff, and it's like, whatever, new wave or something. But there might be a metal show, and like chairs would be broken, and they would write graffiti in the bathroom, or maybe blow up a toilet with firecrackers or M80s. So like, no more bands. So you'd have to like rent a spot or something, or have it in someone's backyard or in a mill. And the cops would always seem to come. In New Bedford, people have these crazy house parties in Providence. I'm like, there's 200 people in the yard. They're blowing up fireworks. There's dogs screaming. I'm like, this is fun. But there are neighbors all around. Like, no one's calling the police. That's interesting. But in New Bedford, you just can't do that. You'll either have like someone come and like rob you and start shooting, or the police will come. So it's always been very difficult to play in New Bedford. But for about 8 years, maybe 10 years, there was a place called the New Wave Cafe. Mine was just before you moved here. But the New Wave Cafe was interesting because I used to play there with Picnic Lunch before they were Picnic Lunch, and Devin had the modern day urban barbarians from Brooklyn. He lived there, and he would come visit because he's from here but lived in New York for like 10 years. So they allowed us to have some really wild stuff there. and Six Finger Satellite and some of the Load Records bands from Providence. But they made money because they'd have DJs and they'd have metal, and they had an open mic night, which was interesting because it was an open mic night with drums and amps. So a lot of bands actually formed from that open mic night, which is weird, which is something we don't now have now too, because like my friend Chris Evil does an open mic sometimes, but it's acoustic. There is no like electric open mic around here now too, you know. But you know, you're in business to make money. So eventually it just was pretty much all metal the last couple of years there, you know.
Yeah.
The Grateful Dead tribute band on Tuesdays and metal every other night, you know. But for a couple of years it had some different stuff. And that was the closest we've had in a long time. No Problemo. His Craig's main business is to sell burritos, you know, and he's pretty awesome at it.
He's great at it, yeah.
And so they have less and less. It's always been like weird that they'd have shows every Friday and Saturday for a while, but then they just want to do shows in the winter. Okay, I guess no one can tour in the winter, you know, whatever. So and he just hasn't been doing much the last couple of years. It's kind of a hassle too, you know, for him, like.
They stopped with COVID, so
yeah.
I mean, restarting it as a regular thing is probably a bit of a bear too, once you get used to having a particular rhythm.
So it's sporadic there. We do well there, and it's fun, and people are nice there. You can always rent the Gallery X, I guess.
You could.
You know, but it's like, well, what if you have something that's so avant-garde, you're not even going to make it used to be 150. I don't know what it costs now. What if you don't even make your 150 back and they don't sell alcohol there, you know? So it's
right.
Tough.
Tough finding places to play. You just have to keep inventing them.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now?
Okay, so Baylies Band is still going, and we have no plans to record them quite yet because we just put out 2 vinyls in the last 4 months. But so we're still playing shows and stuff. We always play these small places. We'll play in the Met and the Sinclair again in a few months.
Nice.
We play a lot of shows with the Talking Heads tribute band, which I would have been reluctant to do at one point, but we want to play with original bands. But geez, you know, it's nice sometimes to play to 700-800 people, get paid, get treated nice, and they're a cover band, but they're really good, and it's music I like. And it's nice too when we play with them. They don't have anything for sale, so I monopolize the booth. I have my books, we have our records, we have shirts, you know. So it's nice. I played the Sinclair a few times now, and it's funny because I opened for Wire there in Minibeast, and I played there a few times. And no one returns emails. I only play there when someone asks us to. You can't even get into places like that. It's kind of frustrating, but they want to return your calls. We just did very great here. No, they won't even, you know, it's weird. So corporate, but so I play Baylies Band. I play in a band called Psychedelic Jazz Trio, which is an improv band. I play sporadically in Free Jazz Now when none of the other bands can play. It's me and a revolving cast of people, which is an improv thing. I started a new band a couple of months ago. We still don't have a name, but it's my friend Wendy from Suicide Magnets from Philly, but she lives in Providence now. The drummer of Only Little Sound System, and he was a Minibeast with me too. And I and this other guitar player from New York City, which is crazy that he comes down, but he has family in Providence, you know. I had quit, so I'm in a band with a guy from the drummer, but I was also in a Minibeast for 5 years with Peter Prescott of Mission of Burma. So we got to play a lot of cool stuff. We toured with Pere a few weeks.
Nice.
So that's about what I'm doing. I'm writing. I'm trying to collect. I'm taking the summer off. I'm trying to either put out a book of short stories, which might be the easier thing, but I'm trying to change some of the names and connect the stories into a longer novel with chapters that lead into each other, which is not easy. So I'm going to do either one of those with that. And I've been talking to people. I've been starting I've begun a history of Providence rock from 1982 to the present, trying to interview people that are still alive or not in jail or whatever, you know, that I can track down. Because a lot of the older people too, people that are playing now or 10 years ago, I can find, but a lot of the people that were playing back then are not on social media, if they're still, you know, alive or whatever. So that's what I'm doing, enjoying my summer off and trying to work.
Got it. Anything you want to talk about that we haven't touched on yet?
I think that's about it. I mean, I could talk for 12 hours, but I think that pretty much covers everything.
Well, can I ask you 5 final questions I tend to ask musicians?
Sure.
What's your first musical memory?
I have a brother that's like 10 years older, so when I was little, my friends would tend to listen to Bay City Rollers and Neil Sedaka and Barry Manilow, whatever. I was lucky enough to skip over that step of musical evolution. And when I was little, I already listened to Black Sabbath, and Led Zeppelin, and the Beatles and stuff. So there's that. But then on my parents' side, probably some of my earliest things of watching, like, and the good thing I had brothers that I could listen to that. And then when punk came around when I was like 9, 10 years old, listening to punk and stuff. But on my parents' side, earliest things, probably watching the Sonny and Cher show, because they had a lot of musical guests, and also Cher would sing, like every third segment, she would sing either solo or with Sonny Bono. And it's a good thing, because I like a couple of Cher songs. And she was very sexy. I was like, who's this lady? You know, why is she not dressed like all the other ladies? I think I like her. Wow. But it's a good thing I had brothers too, because she has a couple of good songs, but if it was just like stuff like that, I probably wouldn't be too into music until I was much older, because my parents would watch like that, had some good songs, but like Tony Orlando and Dawn. I don't know if you remember that scene.
I do.
So awful.
I'm like 2 years younger than you.
So awful.
I remember it.
They would watch Captain and Tennille. So awful.
Lawrence Welk? Was Lawrence Welk?
I was going to say Lawrence Welk. Now, that's obviously a lot different from all that, but like Lawrence Welk, which is like, you know, I like classical music or big band music, but that was like the worst watered down garbage. And also like Hee Haw. So
that was a part of the house. That was Saturday night. Lawrence Welk and Hee Haw.
I don't know much about country music back then, but like now I like some of the old 70s storyteller, 60s storyteller country. I hate the new country, but that would tend to be like the worst of country music, you know? And it's unfortunate that I look back now, like, I wish somebody in the house watched Soul Train, because I didn't really watch that till later, and then reruns of it. That was the best thing, but we didn't watch it. Like, oh man. And then Don Kirshner's rock concert, Midnight Special, I didn't see too much when I was little, because they wanted like 11, 12 o'clock.
Super late, yeah.
So I couldn't see that till when I was like 12 or 13. I could start watching that. Boom, they're off the air. You know? But then MTV started on then too. And when they started, they would actually have like some good concerts on like Saturday at 11, I guess. They had King Crimson on.
What?
King Crimson concert, which is nuts. But then the next 5 weeks might be like, you know, whatever.
Right.
Not so good maybe. But
what's one record you'd have to take with you to a desert island?
How would I play it?
I'm going to grant you a hi-fi system
Okay.
and portable electricity that never runs out.
Okay, I don't. You know, it's going to change all the time. So,
yeah.
But at this second, right now, I would say Pink Floyd, Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Just for now.
All right. What's one super sneaky secret influence? Somebody that, you know, people listen to you or read your books, they'd be like, that guy, really? Or, you know, just wouldn't take that person as an influence.
Well, I don't know. I think with the writing, like Kafka and Camus and Vonnegut, I think it's pretty apparent. So I'm not sure about the writing so much. I mean, with the writing, maybe you could say Charles M. Schultz of Snoopy, or like, you know, or Gary Larson, or the guy that wrote Bloom County or whatever.
Burt Breathitt, yeah.
Some of that stuff, maybe subconsciously or inadvertently. Musically, it's tough because you know, I was into, you know, I've played with Mo Tucker, Velvet Underground. I've played backing up Pauline Oliveris' ensemble. She's like the first like female John Cage kind of modern composer. Played with Steve McKay, the Stooges, and on the new Baylies Band record, I don't think I mentioned, but on the new Baylies Band record, we have some guest stars. We have Brendan Canty of Fugazi.
That's great.
Makoto of Acid Mother's Temple. Dana Colley of Morphine, and John Drumbo French of Captain Beefheart playing a new record. And people are like, how did he do that? Some I've known a little bit. My friend has been he's American, but he's been the tour bus driver, more like a van, and merch guy for Acid Mother's Temple for like 20 years. And I've been friends with him for about 20 years. So that was easy. And I played in Minibeast with the Mission of Burma drummer. We played about 6-7 shows with Brendan Canty in Massachusets and Super Silver Haze, a couple of bands he was doing. So I knew him slightly. Calling a friend would be a stretch. So when I called him, I was like, very nervous. Like, but, you know, COVID's like the most horrible thing to happen in my lifetime, I guess, right? Or recently, besides AIDS when I was young. The good thing that came out, I guess, well, you know, you couldn't play live, otherwise people couldn't make any money, is some of these people were so bored out of their mind, just in the house with their wife all the time or something, that they were able to play digitally, play on a record.
Yeah. Which
I hate to say, but honestly, probably wouldn't have given me the time of day 10 years before, you know? So, and we only had to pay one of them. So that was like a godsend for us, you know?
Yeah.
But, so I played with a lot of these like underground guys. I was in a band, Temple of Bon Matin from Philly for like 6-7 years. And he had played with a bunch of guys from Sun Ra and stuff. And he still played with Marshall Allen in Europe last year. Marshall just turned 99 and he's still playing out.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. So sure, he doesn't sleep on the floor though anymore.
I hope not.
So you would think it's all these guys, you know, but you know, we've kind of switched from a Sonic Youth band for 20-something years that we're kind of like a Talking Heads, B-52s with a little bit of Radiohead, go for the fall kind of band. So, you know, I grew up on the Beatles. I like melody and harmony and catchy choruses. I just didn't really do that for most of my life, but we have a little bit of that now in Baylies Band. So, you know, they might be surprised I like Leonard Cohen and Nick Drake.
Yeah.
You know, or Nina Simone. So maybe they won't be surprised, but
we'll let them be surprised.
Yeah. Surprise.
Who's one musician, living or dead, you'd want to work with? So you presumably haven't, because you named some very cool folks in the last couple of minutes alone.
You know, people sometimes ask, like, who would you want to be in a band with or have your backing band? So there's ideas like that. But I would have loved to work with, like, David Bowie or Prince. But certainly I would be, like, the hired gun or the studio guy, you know? Certainly if I had that crazy opportunity, I don't think I'd be like, hey, David.
I got a song.
I wrote these lyrics. No. Can you sing it more like this?
Right.
I don't think that would happen. It would just be like, listen to the drummer play bass. Okay, wow, yeah. You know, with those guys. But so yeah, Prince, Bowie, Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to work with them. We've got to open for Thurston Moore.
Oh wow.
I don't know him. I'd love to play him. I know it was funny because they're one of my favorite bands, and I got really early to a show. They weren't even really open yet. They're like, I would ever come in at the old Loopholes in Providence. And I was just a little nervous. It's nice that you can email people now. You don't have to, they can't tell the fear in your voice. Like, oh, we want to play your club. People really like us, you know, like, but I gave him a CD in like 1999. And I was just like, here, you know. And he was like, oh, wait, let me, and he was like, oh, he wanted to talk about it. Like, oh, what do you guys listen to? And it was weird because, especially back then, the first thing I would say Sonic Youth and Swans. And I felt funny saying like, oh, like Sonic Youth to this guy. But I spoke to him for like a half hour. I was like, wow, very disarming. Look, he's a very big guy. You know? I'm short and he's a very tall man. So he's very nice. And then another time I've seen him like 12 times, you know. But another time I saw Lee Ronaldo between bands or something. Maybe he was going to the bathroom. Maybe Mary shouldn't have bugged him, you know. But I was like, here, and I gave him probably a different CD, but I gave him a CD one time. It was interesting because he never broke his stride. He did say thank you, I think. But he was like, thank you, and just like kept walking. It was like, it was funny how different they are, you know. And on the other hand, you know, maybe he was dying for a drink, and maybe they played 50 nights in a row, and he's just sick of people and he just wants to go to the dressing room and relax. So, that's fine,
Yeah.
you know.
You never know.
But it's just interesting how they were so different. Like I was almost disarming with Thurston while I wasn't prepared to talk to him, you know.
And they were talking with him for 30 minutes.
And they were talking about all kinds of stuff. I was like, wow, he's nice. I just read his ex-wife's book. She doesn't think he's very nice, but he's very nice to his fans.
Yeah.
You know.
Last question. What is your South Coast happy place?
No Problemo, Frontera, and I like going to Profile Rock in Freetown, and I like going to the Reservoir. I think Freetown, it might actually be Lakeville, but the Reservoir out there is a very, very nice place, also relaxing.
Eric, thank you so much. Great conversation. It was great hanging out with you for the last hour or so, and looking forward to whatever you do next.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for another In Focus podcast, which is generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agencies supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. I'm Scott Bishop, and thanks for listening to The Artist's Index.